What if the most valuable asset in a billion-dollar empire wasn't a patent, a stock, or a corner office, but a secret held in the heart of the person who cleaned it? What if the key to unlocking unimaginable abundance wasn't forged in the fires of ambition, but discovered in the quiet humility of a life lived in the shadows? We are told to look up, to aim for the top of the glittering skyscrapers that pierce the clouds. But what if the greatest truths, the most profound answers, are found by looking down, by noticing the people we've trained ourselves to ignore? This is a story about a woman who was invisible, and the man who finally learned how to see. Her name was Alara, and every night, she polished a world that was not her own. The headquarters of Thorn Industries was a cathedral of glass and steel, a monument to the relentless pursuit of profit. To the executives who strode its marble floors, she was a ghost in a gray uniform, a fleeting presence in their peripheral vision as they raced toward the next deal, the next victory. Her world was one of squeaking carts, the sharp scent of ammonia, and the rhythmic swish of a mop painting temporary, clean patterns on floors that would be dirted again by morning. It was a life of repetition, of quiet service, a penance she paid for a past that clung to her like the city grime. Her mother's illness was a relentless thief, stealing not just health and memory, but every dollar Alara earned. The medical bills were a mountain, and she was at its base, chipping away with a tiny hammer, her dreams buried under an avalanche of debt. But within this invisible woman, a gift resided, a secret language that only she could understand. Alara didn't just see the world, she felt its patterns. To her, data wasn't a string of cold numbers. It was a symphony of color and light. A balanced budget was a warm, golden harmony. A risky stock trade was a flash of jagged crimson. It was a form of synesthesia so unique, so profound, that she had no words for it. She simply called it the knowing, and in the silent, empty hours of the night, as she cleaned the office of the company's CEO, Julian Thorne, her gift would scream. Julian Thorne was a king on a throne of ice. From his penthouse office, he commanded an empire built by his father, a legendary titan of industry whose shadow Julian could never quite escape. He was brilliant, ruthless, and profoundly lonely. His world was binary, a stark landscape of profit and loss, success and failure. He spoke the language of algorithms and market projections, but he was deaf to the symphony Alara heard. His current obsession, his potential salvation or his ruin, was sprawled across a massive whiteboard that covered an entire wall. Project Chimera. It was a predictive algorithm meant to be his legacy, a machine that could see the future of the market, a way to finally eclipse his father's ghost. But it was failing. The code was elegant, the datasets massive, but the results were chaotic, discordant. It was losing the company millions with every failed simulation, and the board of directors was growing restless. Their whispers were like circling sharks, and the most dangerous among them was Marcus Vance. Vance was a man made of sharp angles and condescending smiles, a creature of the old guard who saw Julian's reliance on technology as a weakness. He wanted the throne for himself, and Project Chimera was the perfect weapon to usurp it. One night, as Alara emptied the trash bin in Julian's silent office, her eyes were drawn to the whiteboard. It wasn't the complex equations or the lines of code that she saw. It was a mess, a cacophony of clashing colors, a violent, muddy brown clashing with a sickly green. It was a song played horribly out of tune. Her gaze traced the flow of the logic, following the jarring, dissonant notes until she found the source. It was a single variable, a tiny assumption buried deep within the core logic. It was a sour, gray note in a sequence that needed a pure, clear blue. Her heart pounded in her chest. To touch it would be an unimaginable transgression. Could mean her job, the only thing keeping her mother's care afloat. She was a ghost. Ghosts were not supposed to interact with the world of the living. But the wrongness of it, the screeching disharmony on that board, was a physical pain to her. Her hand trembled as she picked up a blue dry erase marker from the tray. Just one little change. A single, elegant curve to connect 2 points that were fighting each other. She drew the line, altering the variable's relationship to the whole. Instantly, in her mind, the symphony resolved. The muddy brown and sickly green receded, replaced by a deep, resonant indigo, a color of stability and profound insight. It was right. It was whole. Terrified by her own audacity, she capped the marker, wiped her sweaty palms on her uniform, and fled the office, the sound of her own frantic heartbeat echoing in the empty hall. She had no idea that she had just rung a bell that could never be unrung, setting in motion a chain of events that would shatter her world, and his, forever. She spent the rest of her shift in a cold sweat, imagining the security guards at her door, the termination of her employment, the loss of everything. The sun rose on a city of possibilities, but for Alara, it felt like a spotlight illuminating her impending doom. Julian Thorne did not sleep. Sleep was a luxury for men who were not at war, and he was at war with his father's legacy, with his board, and most of all with the infuriatingly broken code of Project Chimera. He arrived at his office before the first rays of dawn painted the sky, his face a mask of grim determination. He had run another simulation overnight, expecting the same chaotic, money-hemorrhaging result. But as the data loaded on his screen, he froze. The coffee cup in his hand stopped halfway to his lips. It wasn't just better. It was perfect. The algorithm hadn't just predicted the last 24 hours of market fluctuations. It had done so with a 984% accuracy. It had seen trends no human analyst could have caught, made connections that seemed impossible. It was the breakthrough he had been chasing for years, a quantum leap forward. But how? He hadn't changed anything. His eyes darted to the whiteboard, the physical representation of the code's soul. And there it was, a single, elegant line of blue marker, not his own hurried black scrawl. It was a change so small, so deceptively simple, yet it had fundamentally altered the entire system. It was like changing the fulcrum on a lever and suddenly finding the strength to move the world. Who? His mind raced. His lead programmers were locked out of the core code. No one had access but him. Fury warred with utter bafflement. He stormed to his desk and pulled up the security logs for the past 12 hours. He fast-forwarded through the empty, silent footage of his office, the city lights twinkling like a distant, indifferent galaxy outside his window. Then he saw it, a figure in a gray uniform, the cleaning lady. He watched, his jaw tightening, as the ghost he never truly saw approached his life's work. He saw her pause, her head tilted as if listening to music he couldn't hear. He saw her hand, small and hesitant, reach for the marker. He watched her draw that single, perfect, world-changing line. And then she was gone. He replayed the footage 3 times. It made no sense. It was impossible. A janitor? A janitor had just solved a problem that had stumped a team of the brightest minds money could buy. It was either an accident of cosmic proportions, a random, thoughtless scribble that happened to be the key to everything, or it was something else entirely. Something he couldn't comprehend. He looked at her name on the night shift roster. Alara Vance. No, that wasn't right. Alara Vetrova. He buzzed his assistant. Get me Alara Vetrova from the night shift custodial staff. In my office. Now the call found Alara in her tiny apartment, where the smell of cabbage soup and old memories hung in the air. She was trying to coax her mother into taking her morning medication, her hands gentle, her voice a soft murmur. When the phone rang, displaying the Thorne Industries main number, her blood ran cold. This was it. The summons. The end. She walked through the opulent lobby in her worn coat, feeling the stares of the immaculately dressed employees like physical blows. She was a weed in a manicured garden. When she was ushered into the penthouse office, the same room she cleaned in darkness, it felt alien and terrifying in the bright light of day. Julian Thorne stood by the panoramic window, a severe silhouette against the sprawling city. He didn't turn around immediately, letting the silence stretch, letting her feel the full weight of his power and her transgression. Did you do this? He finally asked, his voice low and devoid of emotion. He gestured to the whiteboard. Alara's throat was dry. She could lie. She could plead ignorance, claim it was an accident. It was the safe path, the one that might save her job. But looking at the beautiful, resolved pattern on the board, The lie felt like a betrayal of the one true and magical thing about her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I did," he turned then, his eyes, the color of a winter storm, boring into hers. They were not angry. They were intensely, unnervously curious. "Explain it to me," he said, not as a demand, but as a genuine request. She struggled for words, for the technical jargon she didn't possess. I don't know the code," she stammered, twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. "I just saw it. The pattern was wrong. It was tangled. It felt loud and ugly, like nails on a chalkboard, but in my head. That one variable. It was fighting everything else. It was a knot. I just untied it." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading for him to understand something she couldn't properly explain. It needed to be connected. It needed a thread of blue to make it quiet. Julian stared at her, his meticulously ordered world tilting on its axis. A thread of blue. He, a man who lived by data and logic, was being told his billion-dollar algorithm was fixed by a janitor who saw musical colors in his code. The absurdity was staggering, but the results on his screen were undeniable. Marcus Vance would call him insane. The board would have him committed. But Julian Thorne hadn't built on his father's empire by following the rules. He had done it by recognizing value where no one else saw it. And in this terrified, unassuming woman, he saw a value so profound, so utterly unique, it defied all logic. He saw a key. "What if I told you," Julian began, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the vast, silent office, "that this thread of blue is worth more than this entire building?" Alara blinked, certain she had misheard him. The chasm between her life and his was too wide to be crossed by a single sentence. He was a king, and she was someone who scrubbed his floors. Kings did not speak this way to ghosts. "I don't understand, sir," she said, her voice trembling. He walked slowly from the window to his desk, his movements precise and controlled, but his eyes never left her face. He was studying her, dissecting her, trying to see the gears turning behind her wide, frightened eyes. "For 2 years," he said, "I have paid a team of geniuses, PhDs from the best universities in the world, a small fortune to find that thread of blue. They have built models, run regressions, and coded until their eyes bled. And they all failed. Then you walk in here with a mop and a bucket, and you solve it in 30 seconds. So, I will ask you again, Alara Vetrova. How?" The question hung in the air, a genuine puzzle he was desperate to solve. Alara took a shaky breath. The truth was all she had. "It's not something I learned," she tried to explain, her hands gesturing helplessly. "It's just how I see. Numbers, patterns, systems. They have colors, shapes, textures. When they're in harmony, they create a beautiful picture. When they're not, like your project, the picture is ugly. It hurts to look at. I just made it beautiful again." He leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. The Ice King persona was still there, but a crack had appeared in the facade, a sliver of raw fascination showing through. "So you're an artist and my algorithm is your canvas." It wasn't a mocking statement. It was an attempt to translate her reality into a language he could process. She nodded, a small, hesitant gesture. "I suppose so." At that moment, the door to the office opened without a knock, and Marcus Vance strode in, a folder in his hand and a predatory smile on his face. "Julian, we need to talk about the quarterly projections. They're a disaster, and the board is—" His voice trailed off as he saw Alara. He looked from her worn uniform to Julian's intense expression, and his smile tightened into a sneer of contempt. "What is this? Did she spill something on the rug?" The dismissal in his tone was a physical blow. Alara shrank back, the familiar cloak of invisibility wrapping around her once more. Julian, however, didn't even glance at Marcus. His eyes remained fixed on Alara. "Marcus, you are interrupting," he said, his voice dropping a degree colder. "This is Ms. Vetrova. She is my new consultant on Project Chimera." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus Vance's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, And finally, incredulous rage. He let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. "You're joking. Tell me you're joking, Julian. This is a janitor. Have you lost your mind? Is this some kind of bizarre prank to distract the board from the fact that Chimera has lost us another $50 million? On the contrary," Julian said, picking up a tablet from his desk and sliding it toward Marcus. "As of 3:37 this morning, Project Chimera is not only viable, it's the single most powerful predictive tool on the planet. Thanks to Ms. Vetrova's consultation." Marcus stared at the data on the screen, his face paling. The numbers were undeniable. The success was absolute. His eyes darted back to Alara, now with a venomous suspicion. "This is impossible. She must have gotten lucky. Or she's a corporate spy. Did you check her background? This is a setup." Julian's gaze turned to Marcus, and for the first time, Alara saw the full, chilling power of the Ice King. "Get out of my office," Marcus, sputtering, his face flushed with fury, backed out of the room, throwing one last hateful glare at Alara before slamming the door. The echo faded, leaving Alara alone with Julian once more. Her heart was a trapped bird beating against her ribs. "He thinks I'm a fraud," she whispered. "Everyone will." "Let them," Julian said, his voice softening slightly as he turned back to her. "Their opinions are irrelevant. The results are all that matters." He walked over to her, closing the space between them until he was standing just a few feet away. "I am going to make you an offer, Alara. I want you to work here, with me, on this project. I will pay you a salary that will seem absurd to you. I will personally see to it that every one of your mother's medical bills is paid in full. Today. In return," he paused, his gaze intense, "you will teach me how to see." The offer was a lifeline thrown into the churning waters of her life. It was a fantasy, a fairy tale, but it was also terrifying. To step out of the shadows, to be seen, to be judged. It was a world she was not prepared for. And what if it was a fluke? What if her gift failed her under the bright lights of expectation? I can't," she stammered. "I don't belong here. I clean floors. You don't belong here," Julian repeated, a wry smile touching his lips for the first time. "Ms. Vetrova, you are the only person who does. Everyone else, myself included, has just been guessing. You are the only one who actually knows." He extended a hand. "You have a gift, Alara. A gift that could change everything. Don't hide it in the dark. Help me show the world what it looks like in the light." Alara looked at his outstretched hand, then at the whiteboard with its beautiful, harmonious pattern. For the first time in a very long time, a flicker of something other than fear ignited within her. It was a spark of hope, a whisper of possibility. Hesitantly, she placed her small, calloused hand into his. His grip was firm, steady. It was the closing of a deal, but it felt like something more. It felt like the beginning of a new symphony. The transition from a life of shadows to one lived under the fluorescent glare of a corporate spotlight was brutal. Julian was true to his word. Within a day, her mother's staggering medical debt vanished, paid by an anonymous benefactor. A salary that contained more zeros than she had ever seen in one place was deposited into her barren bank account. She was given an office with a window, a sleek laptop she was afraid to touch, and a corporate credit card for a new wardrobe. But the new clothes felt like a costume. The office felt like a cage, and the stares of her new colleagues were a constant, unnerving reminder that she was an imposter. Marcus Vance had made sure of it. He had subtly, poisonously, spread the story of the miracle janitor. It was a tale told with sneers in the break room and condescending chuckles in the elevator. Alara was a freak, a fluke, Julian's pet project, his latest eccentricity on his path to self-destruction. The programmers who had worked on Chimera for years were openly hostile, their professional pride wounded by the fact that their complex work had been upstaged by an uneducated cleaner. They spoke to her in acronyms and jargon she didn't understand, setting technical traps in meetings, waiting for her to fail, to expose herself as the fraud they all believed her to be. She would sit in sterile boardrooms, the crisp white shirt scratching at her neck, and listen to them talk about data streams and volatility indexes. To her, it was just noise. She needed to see it to feel the shape and color of the information. She tried to explain, but her words about jagged reds and calming greens were met with blank stares or poorly concealed smirks. The pressure was suffocating. The beautiful, intuitive gift that had flourished in silence and solitude was wilting under the harsh light of scrutiny. She began to doubt herself. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was just a lucky guess. The weight of Julian's faith in her felt less like a comfort and more like a crushing burden. She was terrified of failing him, of proving his enemies right and destroying the man who had, for some inexplicable reason, chosen to believe in her. Julian saw her struggles. He saw the fear in her eyes and the way she seemed to shrink with every condescending remark from his staff. He saw his world, the world he had mastered, trying to extinguish her unique light. One evening, he found her in her office, long after everyone else had gone home, staring blankly at a screen full of impenetrable code. She looked small and defeated. He didn't offer platitudes or empty encouragement. Instead, he simply said, "This isn't working." Alara flinched, thinking he was talking about her, that he was finally giving up on his foolish experiment. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. "I tried." "No," he said, his voice gentle. "I mean this." He gestured to the office, the computer, the entire corporate setup. "I've made a mistake. I pulled you into my world and expected you to conform. I should have been trying to enter yours." The next day, her sterile office was transformed. The desk and computer were gone. In their place stood a massive, wall-sized touchscreen, a digital canvas. The programmers were instructed, under Julian's direct and unarguable command, to create a new interface for Project Chimera. One that didn't display numbers or charts, but translated the raw data streams into visual representations. Flowing rivers of color, shifting geometric shapes, pulsating fields of light. They thought he was insane, but they did it. When Alara walked in, she stopped, breathless. It was her language. He had built a bridge between his world and hers. That night, they worked together for the first time as true partners. "Show me," he said, his voice quiet with anticipation. Alara touched the screen. As the live market data flowed into the system, the canvas came alive. It was a swirling, chaotic vortex of color. "This is the market now," she said, her voice gaining confidence. "It's anxious. See the flickering yellow? That's uncertainty. And that deep, angry purple, that's a big fund preparing to make a move." This aggressive Julian watched, mesmerized. He was seeing the abstract forces he'd studied his entire life made manifest, given form and emotion. It was like a deaf man hearing music for the first time. They spent hours, then nights, in that room. The professional distance between them began to dissolve, replaced by a deep, unspoken connection. In the quiet hours before dawn, surrounded by the glowing, dancing colors of the global economy, they talked. He told her about the immense pressure of his father's name, the loneliness of the top, the fear that he was just a caretaker of a legacy, not a creator of one. She told him about her mother, about the years spent watching her fade, about the quiet strength it took to care for someone who no longer knew who you were. He saw the profound integrity and resilience beneath her quiet exterior. She saw the vulnerability and the yearning for connection beneath his icy armor. A fragile, tentative romance began to bloom, not in words, but in shared glances, in the way he would bring her coffee without asking, in the way she would smile when he finally began to see the patterns for himself. "The green is fading," he'd say, pointing at the screen. "Is that a sign of weakening consumer confidence?" And she would look at him, her heart doing a strange little flutter, and nod. "You're learning." But their growing bond did not go unnoticed. Marcus Vance watched from the shadows, his jealousy and resentment festering. Julian was not just trusting the janitor. He was falling for her. It was a weakness Marcus could exploit. He saw his chance to destroy not just Julian's career, but his spirit as well. He began to lay a trap, a sophisticated, digital time bomb hidden deep within the company's servers, waiting for the perfect moment to detonate. And that moment was coming. Julian, confident in Alara's gift and the new visual interface, had called a full board meeting. He was staking everything on a final, live demonstration. He would have Project Chimera predict the next 12 hours of trading on the most volatile market in the world. If they succeeded, their opponents would be silenced, and the company's future would be secured. If they failed, Julian would lose everything. The stage was set for a triumph or a public execution, and Alara was standing at the center of it. The day of the demonstration arrived cloaked in a tense, electric silence. The main boardroom at Thorn Industries, a chamber usually reserved for momentous decisions, felt like a courtroom. The long, polished table reflected the grim faces of the board members, a gallery of old money and established power. They sat with their arms crossed, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and morbid curiosity. They had come to see Julian Thorn, the golden boy, the heir apparent, either perform a miracle or commit career suicide. Marcus Vance was the picture of feigned concern. His brow furrowed, his hands steepled before him, but his eyes held a glint of predatory triumph. He knew what was coming. At the head of the room, on the massive digital canvas, the market data swirled in a placid, gentle dance of blues and greens. It was the calm before the storm. Alara stood beside the screen, dressed in a simple but elegant dark blue dress Julian had insisted she buy. She felt 1,000 pairs of eyes on her, dissecting her, judging her. Her hands were cold, her stomach a knot of dread. Julian stood beside her, a pillar of calm confidence in a tailored suit. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. "They're just people, Alara," he murmured, his voice for her alone. "Don't look at them. Just look at the colors. Just listen to the music." He addressed the board, his voice clear and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 2 years, this company has invested heavily in a project I believe will redefine our future. Today, you will see the results. Ms. Vetrova will now walk you through Project Chimera's live analysis of the Asian market opening." All eyes turned to Alara. She took a deep, shaky breath and touched the screen. "As you can see," she began, her voice gaining strength as she focused on the familiar patterns. "The market is stable, but there is an undercurrent. A subtle shift in the turquoise here, and then it happened. Without warning, the beautiful symphony of color on the screen dissolved into a horrifying screech of digital static. The flowing rivers of data shattered into jagged, ugly pixels of black and red. A single, ominous message appeared in the center of the screen. System-wide data corruption. A collective gasp went through the room. The programmers in the corner began typing frantically on their laptops, their faces pale with panic. "What's happening?" one of the board members demanded. Marcus Vance stood up, his voice ringing with false alarm and righteous indignation. "It's exactly what I warned you about, Julian. This system is unstable. It's a house of cards built on a foundation of fantasy." He pointed a damning finger at Alara. "You staked the future of this company on a charlatan. She has opened our proprietary systems to God knows what. This is a catastrophic failure. I demand an immediate vote of no confidence in the CEO." The room erupted into chaos. Voices were raised. Accusations flew. Alara stood frozen, staring at the corrupted screen. It was all her fault. She had failed. She had destroyed the one person who had shown her kindness, who had believed in her. The colors were gone, replaced by a shrieking, painful void. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the static on the screen. Julian moved to her side, his hand resting lightly on her arm. He ignored the clamor of the board, his focus entirely on her. "Alara, look at me," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. She shook her head, unable to meet his gaze, ashamed and heartbroken. "I'm so sorry, Julian. They were right about me." "No," he said, his grip tightening slightly, forcing her to look at him. "They are wrong. I trust you. Not the machine, not the code. You. Now look at that screen. Look past the noise. Tell me what you see." His unwavering faith was a spark in her darkness. She turned back to the screen, forcing herself to look at the digital chaos. The programmers were shouting about a viral attack, a brute force hack. But Alara, squinting, saw something else. It wasn't random. The static, the corruption. It wasn't pure chaos. It flickered, pulsed. It had a rhythm, a sickly, repeating pattern, a discordant note playing over and over again. "It's not a virus," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "A virus would be messy, spreading in all directions. This is deliberate. It's a loop, a single, malicious piece of code, hiding somewhere, designed to corrupt the data feed at the source. It has a color, a dirty, repeating yellow-brown." Julian turned to his head of IT. "Forget looking for an external breach. She says it's an internal loop. Look for a repeating code string in our most recent server updates." Marcus Vance laughed aloud. "Oh, this is rich. Now the janitor is a cybersecurity expert. Julian, this is a circus. Board members, we must vote now." But Arthur Finch, Julian's loyal lawyer and friend, who had watched the entire spectacle with a growing sense of unease, stepped forward. "Let them look," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. 5 minutes, the head of IT, trusting Julian over the panicked shouts, nodded and his fingers flew across the keyboard. The boardroom fell into a tense, waiting silence. Alara kept her eyes on the screen, her mind tracing the rhythm of the corruption back to its source, like following a poisoned stream back to the well. "It's in the maintenance patches," she said suddenly. "The ones uploaded last night. It's disguised as a diagnostic tool." The IT head's eyes widened. "She's right. I found it. A Trojan horse. It was triggered remotely the second the live feed began. I can trace the origin of the upload." He typed a few more commands, and a name flashed on his screen. He looked up, his face grim. The update was authorized and pushed through from the terminal of Marcus Vance. The silence in the room was now heavy, suffocating. Every eye turned to Marcus, whose face had drained of all color. His carefully constructed mask of concern had shattered, revealing the raw, ugly ambition beneath. He was trapped, exposed by the very woman he had sought to humiliate. The symphony had returned, and it was playing his funeral march.